What if everything you knew about the Lord of the Dead was wrong? Today, we're diving deep into the shadows of the underworld to unearth the truth about Hades, a god who's gotten a bad rap for millennia. Buckle up. This is not the story you expect. Now let's settle in and talk about Hades for a bit, the god who's been playing the villain in stories for far too long. If you are like me and you grew up watching Disney's Hercules, you will have this idea of Hades as the ultimate bad guy and the ruler of a gloomy world which will color your perception when you read Greek mythology. But what if I told you that's not the whole picture? In fact, it's not even close. First off, let's talk about his job. Hades was essentially the ancient world's version of a king, and a judge rolled into one. He ruled the underworld, sure, but this wasn't some luxury gig. It was a necessity, a vital role in keeping the world balanced and orderly. Someone had to do it, and Hades drew the short straw. But here's the thing, he didn't sulk or lash out. Instead, he took his duties seriously, ensuring that the souls of the departed were treated justly. But why do we think of him as evil? Well, it's all about association. He's linked with death, and let's face it, death scares us. It's the big unknown, the final chapter we're not ready to read. And who's smack dab in the middle of it? Hades. Over time, this fear of death got twisted up with the god himself, turning him into a boogeyman of sorts. Let's break it down further. Unlike his brothers, Zeus and Poseidon, who spent their days chasing women whether consensual or not, causing drama and smiting anyone for perceived disrespect when the mood strikes them, Hades was busy maintaining order in the afterlife. He wasn't out there causing trouble or stirring up drama. No, he was too busy making sure that the afterlife ran smoothly. This means he wasn't just throwing every soul into a pit of despair. He was making sure the good folks found peace and the not-so-good ones faced consequences. Fair's fair, right? And here's another thing. Hades rarely left his dark domain. While other gods were mingling on Mount Olympus, Hades was committed to his realm. This isolation contributed to his ominous reputation. Out of sight, out of mind, until you're scared. And then, suddenly, he's all you can think about. But let's talk about the good stuff, the things that stories leave out. Hades was a stable ruler, one of the few gods who didn't cheat on his spouse or get into petty squabbles. When it came to his relationship with Persephone, it started off rocky, no denying that. But over time, it evolved into a partnership, a mutual rulership that was quite progressive for its time. You'd also be surprised by how compassionate and fair Hades really was. Hades did more than just follow a basic ethical rule. He'd often give aid to heroes in need. Hercules can be taken as an example. He came to Hades for a request to take Cerberus to the land of the living. Hades granted the permission to take the three-headed dog under the conditions that Cerberus returned safe and sound. Hades was also especially sympathetic to Orpheus, whose wife had passed away, and in an attempt to bring her back from the underworld. Hades was so moved that he allowed Orpheus to take his wife with him back to the world of life and light. Now, let's take a step into Hades' domain. Forget the fire and brimstone you've been sold. The underworld was a nuanced place with many layers, literally. First off, the underworld wasn't just one big room where everyone got thrown together. It was a vast, intricate realm with different areas for different souls. Think of it like a city with various neighborhoods, each with its own vibe and rules. The most common area was the Asphodel Meadows. This was where your average Joe or Jane would end up. It wasn't a place of punishment or great reward. It was, well, kind of like a never-ending waiting room. People here lived an eternal, neutral existence. Not too bad, but not exactly exciting either. Then you had the Elysium, the VIP section of the underworld. This was where the heroes, the virtuous, and the favored by the gods hung out. It was pretty much the ancient Greek version of paradise. Green fields, endless parties, and all the fun you could have without a hangover. Getting into Elysium was like hitting the celestial jackpot. But there's also the flip side, Tartarus. Now, this place was as bad as it sounds. It was the maximum security prison of the ancient world, reserved for the worst of the worst. We're talking about the truly wicked souls, and even some naughty gods and titans. Tartarus was where you'd find eternal punishments, the kind that make you go, wow, that's harsh. The important thing to remember is that Hades wasn't tossing souls into these places willy-nilly. There was a system, a sort of divine justice. When someone died, they'd be judged, and where they ended up was based on their actions in life. It was all about keeping balance, making sure everyone got what they deserved, for better or worse. But the underworld wasn't just about afterlife real estate. It was a place steeped in rituals and rules. For instance, when a soul arrived, they had to cross the river Styx. This wasn't just any river. It was the boundary between the living and the dead. And to cross it, you needed to pay Charon, the ferryman. No coin for the ferryman? No crossing into the afterlife? Tough, but fair. There's also the whole thing about not being able to leave. Once you were in the underworld, that was it. You were there to stay. This rule applied to everyone, gods included. It was Hades' way of keeping things in order, making sure the dead stayed dead, and the living stayed living. So, you see, the Greek underworld was a lot more than just a spooky place of torment. It was a well-oiled machine, a complex system where justice reigned supreme. Hades, far from being the heartless jailer we've made him out to be, was more of a stern but fair administrator, making sure the cosmic rules were followed. So what made Hades tick? Duty. Unlike the scandal-ridden lives of Zeus and Poseidon, Hades was diligent. His kingdom was his responsibility, and he took it seriously. There were no holidays from death, and thus, no holidays for its ruler. The somber reputation? It comes with the territory. When your job is to manage the dead, you're not winning any popularity contests. But misunderstandings and fear have painted Hades as a tyrant when, in reality, he was the universe's most dedicated civil servant, according to Greek mythology. Now, let's get into one of the most talked about divine relationships, Hades and Persephone. Their story isn't your typical love tale. It's riddled with complexities, twists, and turns that make it a topic of discussion even millennia later. To start, the way they came together wasn't exactly storybook material. Persephone, the vibrant goddess of spring, was minding her own business when Hades, smitten and a bit impulsive, decided to whisk her away to the underworld. It's an abduction, no sugarcoating it, and it sets off a whole chain of events that paints Hades in a bad light at first. But here's where it gets interesting. Over time, something shifts. The narrative we often hear freezes the story at the moment of abduction, but there's so much more. Persephone's time in the underworld changes her. She grows, she adapts, and she begins to rule alongside Hades as a queen in her own right. This isn't about a passive maiden being swept off her feet. This is about a woman coming into her power, learning to navigate and negotiate her place in a world vastly different from her own. And Hades, for all his initial missteps, starts to change as well. The presence of Persephone in the underworld isn't just a change of scenery, it's transformative. The cold, distant ruler finds a partner, someone who not only challenges him but complements him. Their relationship evolves from one of captor and captive to something more nuanced and balanced. They become co-rulers, partners in the truest sense, overseeing the underworld together. But let's not romanticize it too much. Their relationship was complex and fraught with issues, reflecting the broader themes of Greek mythology, where love, power, and autonomy were always tangled up in a messy but fascinating web. The story of Hades and Persephone is a reflection of these themes, a mirror to the ancient world's values, fears, and desires. Their love story also touches on the idea of consent and negotiation. Initially, Persephone didn't have a choice, but as the story unfolds, we see her agency come into play. She negotiates her terms, leading to the arrangement of spending part of the year with her mother Demeter and the rest with Hades. This arrangement not only signifies a compromise, but also illustrates the cyclic nature of life and death, of growth and decay, symbolized through Persephone's dual roles as the goddess of spring and the queen of the underworld. If you haven't realized yet, I'm a bit biased when it comes to the three head honchos of the Greek pantheon. Hades gets too much of a bad rep, however he's not the villain of old tales, but rather a complex deity, embodying justice, duty, and depth. His realm, the underworld, is not a mere pit of despair, but a sophisticated system ensuring cosmic balance. What do you think? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments, and as always, please like and subscribe for more content just like this. Until next time.